bring Vanessa back for some questions in the Q&A period. Well, I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine who's come all the way from Calgary to launch the latest survey of free speech on campus. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is a very, very important nonprofit organization that deserves your support. They rely 100% on individuals for their donations to help them run. They stand for free speech. They're involved in the courts. They're actively working every day for all Canadians in a whole variety of free speech rights. And I'm really proud to have the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, Mr. John Carpay.
Thank you very much, Fred, for the kind introduction. And even more importantly, I want to thank Fred for putting this event together. It came up for discussion. Fred and I were at a Civitas conference in Vancouver, late April, early May. And I said, working on the Campus Freedom Index is about close to a year's worth of work that goes into it, because it's a 250-page report that sets out all these university policies and practices, student union policies, student union practices. And I said, so I want to do this, release it in September. And Fred said, well, I can help you with an event in Ottawa. And I said, really? And so he has done all of this work to get the venue, and Fred's also produced a video that I have not seen that I'm much looking forward to, a short video on the Canadian scene. So thank you, Fred, and thanks to all of you who are here present. And I'm going to speak briefly and then open it up for Q&A. And thanks to Vanessa. That's amazing and fantastic. The Campus Freedom Index is a response to a growing problem in Canada, which is a very slow, gradual erosion of our free speech rights. And it's sad to hear how so many citizens don't have a good grasp of what free speech is about. Because I hear people all the time saying these what I think are very peculiar things. People say, oh yeah, I'm in favor of free speech. You should have the right to say whatever you want, as long as it's not really hurtful to other people. Or you should have the right to say what you want, as long as you're not offending other people. But I think I recently finished reading the book by Ayaan Hirsi Ali, a book called Infidel. And who has read Infidel or heard about it? This is a Dutch, Somali, maybe American now, I don't know what her citizenship is, but a Dutch Somali American woman. And she talked at one time when she was doing a media interview in the Netherlands, and she mentioned in passing that the Prophet Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old who was his wife. He had married her when she was 6. He did wait for 3 years to consummate the marriage. And she described him as a pervert. I don't think there can be any doubt that that comment is highly offensive to Muslims. Or a term like Israeli apartheid, I know is offensive to at least one person and probably a lot of people in this room. It's an offensive term. But if we're going to have free speech, then you cannot draw the line at what is hurtful or offensive, because it becomes meaningless. And even our Supreme Court in Canada has recognized as much. Some of the jurisprudence that's come out from the court has been not bad, and there's certainly some good quotes in there. One of my favorites from Beverly McLaughlin, writing for the majority of the Supreme Court of Canada in the Zundel decision, and she says, this is a paraphrase, not an exact quote, but the views of the majority do not need constitutional protection. They are tolerated in any event. That makes a lot of sense. If it's all about repeating majoritarian platitudes, if it's all about saying things that people don't find offensive, or that very few people find offensive, there's not much of a point to it. Another good holding is that the core of freedom of expression is the right to say things which the majority regards as wrong or false. I'm going to get a little bit later into why this is important, but I'm going to talk about the Campus Freedom Index. The university campus is where you would expect freedom of expression to be the most thriving place. You would think that there is where you would find the greatest amount of tolerance for any idea, every idea, no matter how extreme, no matter how outrageous, no matter how hurtful, no matter how offensive, no matter how stupid. That's the free speech place. That's what you would think. And yet we've known anecdotally for years from media stories about how free speech is suppressed on campus. My friend, Dr. Michael Walker, one of the things that he says often, and I'm a huge believer in it, is, if it matters, measure it. And so rather than just watching this horrifying trend of media reports about diminishing free speech on campus, a few years ago, I thought, we need to actually measure this in some capacity. The first Campus Freedom Index came out in 2011, and we had criteria of good, mediocre, and poor, and that was a good start. But then we got a little bit more refined and a little bit more narrow and a little bit more specific in our grading mechanisms. And so last year, 2012, came out with letter grades. And we also came out with a division. We give separate marks to universities, separate marks to student unions, because they are separate entities and they do separate things. And break down further into what are the policies, which in some cases are fantastic, they're outstanding. And what are the practices, which are usually not nearly as good as the policies. And so in this year's Campus Freedom Index, a 250-page report, and I will just touch on a few of the highlights, but we've gone 45 universities this year, so a pretty large number, most of the public universities in Canada. We're not doing private universities, and there's a good reason for that. It's an entirely different creature. I believe firmly in the right of individuals and private institutions that individuals come together and form to do whatever they want. And so if there's a private university that wants to set up its own speech code and wants to say, there's certain ideas that we allow on campus that we tolerate and there's other ideas that we disallow, if there's a truly private institution, they should be able to do whatever they want in terms of that. I have no right to tell them that they ought to be tolerant of free speech at their private institution. But the 45 universities in our study are all publicly funded. These universities collectively are receiving over 10 billion tax dollars from Canadians each year. 10 billion. And many of them have very express policies saying, our mission is the pursuit of knowledge and the pursuit of truth and the dissemination of knowledge, and to be the forum for the frank debate, and so on and so forth. This is the mission. So they hold themselves out as being a forum for frank debate, frank discussion, and they receive 10 billion tax dollars per year. And then they turn around and they censor groups that they disagree with. They disallow campus free speech. And it's outrageous that taxpayers are forced to pay for this. And so one of the reasons for the Campus Freedom Index is to be a tool for accountability for taxpayers to see how well are these institutions actually living up to their missions. So we have 45 schools. Each school gets a letter grade for university policies, university practices, student union policies, student union practices. So we have 45 schools, 180 grades. Guess how many E's out of 180 letter grades? Any guesses? For somebody who's not read it on the website today. Better than none. We got 6 A's. 6 A's out of 180. 25 B's, 80 C's, 43 D's, and 32 F's. So 32 F's compared to 6 A's and 19 B's. So there's more F's than there are A's and B's combined. So what are some of these examples? Well, you can enjoy 250 pages. I guess you can read a page a day for most of the next of the year. But I'll touch on some of the highlights. Carleton University, it's already been addressed by Vanessa, arresting and handcuffing pro-life students for wanting to express their views on campus, in a prominent place on campus. Dalhousie University earned an F for banning as too controversial British MP George Galloway and American author Jared Taylor. University of Prince Edward Island banned, confiscated an issue of the student newspaper The Cadre for having cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. University of Ottawa sent American author Ann Coulter a threatening letter prior to her arrival. I'm sure that you recall the media coverage on that. And then conveniently failed to provide adequate security so that an angry, loud mob was able to cancel her event. This is one of the ways that universities operate. It's always about safety and security. Amongst my small staff at the Justice Center, I refer to it, as well as my co-author, Michael Kennedy, I call it the dreaded SS, safety and security. Always a pretext for banning controversial speech. University of Manitoba quite recently banned the students against Israeli apartheid because their expression was apparently offensive to Zionists. McGill went the opposite route. McGill Students' Union, there's a Jewish club on campus, had an event called Israel, a Party. And this, I'm not a literature major, but I think it's supposed to be a parody on the Israeli apartheid. So it was Israel, a Party. And so they were ordered by the student union to change the title of their event because this would be offensive because it mocked and ridiculed the concept of Israeli apartheid. So they were allowed to have their event. God bless the freedom-loving student union at McGill. They were allowed to have their event, but it had to be renamed A Party for Israel. So, University of Toronto student union there banned men's issue awareness for the usual predictable reasons. It's offensive, it's insulting, it's hurtful. Ryerson University, same thing. Men's issues group or men's awareness group is not allowed to get off the ground there because the university has said that it's linked to the Canadian Association for Equality, another group which are deemed to be, quote, hate groups. Hate speech. That's